Happiness is beneficial for the body, but it's grief that develops the powers of the mind. Marcel Proust.
You're listening to the Coached Podcast, hosted by Coach Karen Eldad, world-class personal and executive coach. It's your show. We answer your questions, and you get coached on any issue that concerns you. Here's Coach Karen.
Hey, superstars, welcome back to a new season of the Coached Podcast, the show where you call in with your questions and I do my best to serve answers, hope, and respite. This season is a mini-series dedicated to the midlife crisis and how we can turn it into an awakening. Your questions have poured in and we cannot wait to get right to them. But before we do, I wanted to sit down with two of my friends who have triumphed through an immense transition, an immense midlife journey pivot, both during this time period. And we're going to kick off our inspiration with their real life stories. As I said in our opener to this mini series, midlife in particular is a time that can shake us up, but it can also wake us up. In fact, I believe that this is the period most likely to offer you an entree into your awakening. And I can think of no one who turned midlife lemons into lemonade better than my friend and first guest, Ivy Slater. Ivy is the founder of Slater Success Coaching. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Welcome, Ivy.
Oh, Karen, it's so exciting to be here with you.
I'm so happy to be here with you. In fact, I think I fudged your name a little bit because I'm that excited. We've been friends for quite some time now. And, you know, it's funny. We never talked about the midlife crisis until I mentioned to you in our last catch up that I was doing a TED Talk about pray for a midlife crisis. And that's when you told me the most remarkable story. I'm so glad that you're here.
It was brilliant to focus a TED Talk around midlife. And I love the shift that you're going from midlife crisis to midlife awakening, because that's really what it is. We just take this moment of truly stepping into our power at this time of our lives.
And you stepped into your power. In fact, I remember your story started, it was like a movie. Your story started sobbing in line at a Starbucks. Can you share that story so that we can take everybody from crisis to awakening? Because, I've been there and I know a lot of people are still sobbing in that line at Starbucks.
So it was true midlife. It was the month of my 45th birthday. Okay, so you can't get more midlife than that. And things just aligned that I crashed and burned. I'd say it was my month of Noah's Ark. I cried everywhere, and I'm online at Starbucks, and my coffee in the morning is a large skim latte, and I go to order it, and the guy behind the counter goes, "What do you want?" And I said, "A large," and I just burst into tears. He's like, "Coffee's not that big of a deal," and thank goodness I was meeting a friend for coffee before work. And, she kind of came in and swooped and saved the day for the coffee itself. But then I had to kind of save myself. And I realized that, I was 45 years old. I built a phenomenal business. I was making great money. I'd been in the printing industry for 20 years. I was doing wonderfully if you looked at everything on paper. But where I wasn't doing wonderfully was emotionally. And I kept saying, my kids are turning into teenagers. Before I know it, they're going to be off to college. In a blink of an eye, they're going to be out of the house. And I'm going to turn around and say, who am I? What have I done? I've made money. Great. I've been able to afford to send them to summer camp, which, was a wonderful thing, to do the extracurricular activities, all wonderful things. But once they're gone and they're adults, who am I and what value do I have? And I think all of us have dreams when we're young. I was going to be a dancer. I wanted, when I blew out my knee at 22, 23, I was going to be a producer. So I had all these things planned. And I was like, well, I ended up being a printer. A printer? Like, really? Like a dancer? Like, hello? To a producer, to rocking the world. And, I sell printing. I run a great printing company and I make nice money and I have great clients. But when you look in that mirror, who am I? And that was like my awakening. And I knew if I didn't take the time to find myself right then I'd be lost.
Absolutely. And I just want to frame it for people a little bit concretely, because you were not sobbing uncontrollably for no reason. Most of us do not just have episodes of flying into fits, but they are very common in midlife, and they're usually triggered by something. And there are a couple of things that you shared with me, Ivy, that I just wanted to call out. Your father had, I think, very recently had passed away. You were also at a milestone birthday, 45. I just turned 45. Last month, exactly 1 month ago. It's really the smack dab middle of middle age, right? And so that's a very big seismic shift. It comes with a lot of physical changes as well for most of us. And your children are now teenagers. They're on the cusp of adulthood. There is really a big transition happening all around you. So the musings are not pulled out of thin air. There's truly a shift. And that shift is being met with an emotional dynamic. For many people, the midlife crisis does arise around a trigger: death, debt, divorce, children going to college, and what am I going to do next? Of course, also there is that existential crisis that you're also presenting to people that I think everybody can resonate with, which is, really, this is the career I ended up in? I watched City Slickers again over the weekend. Do you remember that movie?
Favorite movie. My favorite movie. We can do a whole episode on that.
I mean, it's such a perfect movie. It's a midlife crisis movie. And it's this guy, Billy Crystal, who's essentially waking up. He sells advertising and he goes, okay, so this is it. And the solution for him is actually not to fully pivot. But in your case, you did. You did come out of that questioning, midlife questioning. Who am I? What am I going to do with the second half of my life, with my second act, with a vastly different answer? Can you talk about that?
So I was scrambling. Okay. So I truly was crying at every turn. I'd have to pull myself together to walk into my office. I'd have to pull myself together from getting off the train. I'm in New York City and going home and not walking into my house, looking like a wreck. So I was crying, but I was also hiding it. And, I said, something has to change. And I am always been a woman who takes action. And I didn't know, okay, what is this going to look like? And I happened to be working out in a park with a girlfriend, and we're doing walking lunges, if you can visualize this. And shockingly, I'm crying. And, I said, who am I? What am I going to do next? Who am I? Who can I be at this point in my life? At this point, I should be thinking not what to start, but how to end it. What is this going to be about? And she just looked at me and she goes, you're a coach. And this was just point in fact. So I'm no longer 45. This happened to be in 2007. So those of you who are enjoying yourself, you could sit and do the math. It was a monumental birthday again for me this year, and there was no tears. And I said, what does that mean? What is coaching? What do you mean? I was a dancer. I'm not going to coach soccer. I certainly can't do that. What are you talking about? And she explained a little bit about the career and the profession. And I said, what would I do with this? And I'm a firm believer in market research. So I started talking to every person I knew. From psychotherapists to people who I knew who were in various areas of publicity and a variety of layers of businesses. I had a meeting with my accountant. I had a meeting with my attorney. I had business meetings. I was like, what do you know? Interesting fact, I had an annual meeting with my accountant and my attorney. This was from April to May. This was during this time period. And it was, kind of like the review from last year. We've just done the taxes, planning for next year. And when I said, hey, I'm thinking about maybe taking some training and enrolling in a certification program about coaching and opening a business, my accountant stood up started berating me, like, you don't know how much money you really make. You don't know what college is really going to cost you. And he started treating me like an uneducated, I hate to say woman. And but that was what was going on. And I looked at him, I'm like, let me tell you something. I've run this business for a long time and I know exactly what I'm doing and I know exactly what I earn. And believe me, I know the cost of college.
Yeah.
I said, and then I looked at my attorney and he looks over at me. He goes, you know, Ivy, I have a client who I think changed careers and is doing something similar. Would you like to introduction to him? It didn't take long. I fired the accountant. The attorney is still in my life.
Yeah.
On a personal and legal perspective. And that next conversation ended up being one of my pieces in market research.
Yeah.
By the end of June, I was enrolled in a certification program. By January of 2008, I had opened Slater Success, and I created a plan to divest myself over the next 2 to 3 years of my printing company, Slater Graphics.
Yeah.
And it was in the decision makings and the power, that market research, that conversations with people, that I think we don't realize how much value that has. And I'll always say, talk to everybody. You know,
everybody.
Just talk to I talked to everybody. I was at a lunch with my daughter's high school. She made a new friend in high school. She went to a new school and this was the mom. And we had lunch, this, that, and the other thing. And then, you know, I was like, oh, you do this, you know, maybe, can I have a separate conversation with you? I'd like to tap your brain on something. And I had a conversation with her and I said, have you heard about coaching? Blah, blah, blah. What do you know about this? Can you pay bills with this? What kind of business model does this look like? Et cetera, et cetera. And she goes, well, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. And I was like, and I took what she knew. And then I was like, okay, this is what we still have to figure out.
Yeah,
and
you were doing market research. You were doing what any entrepreneur would do, which is testing your idea, just testing your idea. And you were also using these conversations, it sounds like, to truly explore fully your idea. What that attorney was doing was just finally reflecting back to you, it's possible, keep going, right? And so this
Correct.
is really key to anybody who's trying to pivot out there. Instead of, well, at some point the sobbing will stop. And by the way, I just wanted to say for everybody out there, the grief is real. In this period, the grief is real and you have to feel the feels. And for anybody out there who's sitting there going, no, yeah, that's not happening for me. All right. I sort of don't buy that. And the reason for it is because the physical changes and the emotional death of identity, the beginning of realizing that you are not the youngest person in the room anymore and you never will be, is extraordinarily painful. But once that's done, you start asking very constructive questions like Ivy is demonstrating here, which is what is next? How viable is the next? And to have the wherewithal, Ivy, to follow on that hunch and to keep going with it. This is a breathtaking thing you're demonstrating here. I just love it.
And I do want to share something because I think that was my 45th birthday. And 5 years later, when Slater Success was moving and grooving, my 50th birthday was a celebration. It was something, my 60th birthday this year was a huge celebration. And I am scaling this company and people say, hey, you know, like you're 60, like, what are your thoughts for the future? I'm like, thoughts for my future? I'm having the best time I've ever had.
Absolutely.
This was
From
a
strength
gift.
to strength. Yes.
You know, and you know, we know when we're full down, the greatest strength is in the pulling of ourselves back up. Yes. Because we use our muscles. If it's our body strength, we pull ourselves up, and from pulling ourselves up, we have the ability to move forward, yes, no matter what. And you know, it's that conviction, and it's okay. We need to cry. We need to grieve. I didn't waste my 20 some odd years in printing. It brought me who I am today. I'm not sorry for it. I'd have no regrets. It built the woman who was able to now build this company.
Let me ask you a question. So since you've done the midlife transition and you understand the awakening on the other side, by the time you were 50, you were already so rejoicing that you were truly celebratory. What else do you think there is to that transition that sort of comes to a completion to the point where you're really starting to move from strength to strength? This is not a factor anymore that you can say to people that will help them through this rocky period.
I think one of the things is know who your support team is and lean on it.
Yeah.
Whether that be a therapist of some sort, family, friends. I mean, I reached out and I was talking to people, reconnecting with people because I needed support. I needed help in getting clarity. I was terrified of the decisions I was about to make. You don't throw away $1 million business, like going to the thrift store. You don't do that. And I was making very, very significant decisions. And so I talked everything through with people I trust. I looked at things from different angles. And to this day, I know who my people are. I know if I'm a little shaky, if I'm going through a bad time, who I reach out to. No, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts of that midlife situation, that midlife crisis, that midlife transition, and most importantly, that midlife opportunity is to know the people who you surround yourself with who have your best interest at heart. They're not buying into fear. They're not buying into the anxiety.
Yes.
They have your best interest at heart. They love you. They have your heart protected.
I love that you threw in there, don't buy into fear, because that is such a key thing that I discovered. So for the record, I mentioned this to you in our conversation, but for all of our listeners out there, I'm pretty confident that I went through my midlife crisis when I was in my mid-30s. And what I had to burn to the ground, and we all have to burn something to the ground, was my marriage and my career, which was a very stable and solid career. And like Ivy is saying, sunken costs are a real factor for most of us. We are very unwilling to burn to the ground and then essentially be left naked as we pivot into our next. But it has to be done. And in order to bridge that gap, Ivy, you're absolutely right, I believe, in saying, take comfort in your tribe, but also rely on your tribe and know which ones of them matter. Because what you're going to hear more than the supportive voices, in my experience, and in my experience as a coach, is actually the accountant's voice, which is, are you crazy? And why would you do this? And this is not only not pragmatic, it's irresponsible. Your job will be to silence those voices, at least within your own head, and to continue to follow that hunch and to do what you really need to do in order to make that second half of life not resemble the sunken costs of the first half of life. The midlife transition is, I think, about boundaries. It's about realizing who you really are and allowing yourself to be who you really are. And you're not going to go if you keep succumbing to fear. So that fearlessness in your tribe, Ivy, is such a key and critical point and such a wonderful, I think, piece of advice to anybody. What a relatable story. In my case, I shared this with you too, Ivy. I was also in a sobbing phase. And I think the reason the sobbing happens is because your body is finding a way to say to you, you can't go on like this. You got to do something about this. Would you agree?
I think it is, when you get to this point, your whole body is telling you to pause, take a breath. And so everybody, it's different. I think the sobbing and the tears come from that point of your body saying, take that pause, slow down, take a breath. I think that's important. I think sometimes when we just rush to run through something, we miss out on the process and some of the greatest results by being in that process.
Completely agree. What you described as your questioning period, that was when I turned to all the self-help and personal development books for the first time. It was when I started hiring coaches and working with them. I assume that was very similar for you too. It's a really deeply reflective period that adds to the market research. Is that right?
Well, one of the things that I have come to learn in pulling that support team together is sometimes the people closest to you your spouse, your family, your BFFs, okay? They want to protect you because they love you. And that's not what you need. You don't need the protection. You need the encouragement. You need the care. You need the love. And you need the strength. And you want to surround yourself with people who are not pulling you. You know, when you're looking to grow from a midlife crisis, you're making decisions. You're taking new risks into unknown places, places you might not have been before. I never opened a business like this, right? I opened another company, but I never opened anything like this. And if I surrounded myself with people who was like, you could lose a lot of money, like the accountant, like, oh, what are you risking in college and all those things? People were coming from, you know, a place of, have you looked at this? Are you crazy? You know, yet I had a very, very dear friend, a business associate. And I said, can we take a walk? Took a long walk. I told him what was going on. And he looked at me and he goes, you haven't been happy, Ivy. He goes, it's been apparent. You haven't been happy. He goes, I am for your happiness. We'll figure out how we're going to navigate your clients, what we're going to do with your business. We'll figure that out. And of course you can build another business. You're smart. You've done this, that, and the other thing. You'll figure all that out. Don't worry about that. And we'll figure this out. And I'm here to support you. And he goes, and when you want to take another walk, just let me know. And that was holding the space of what was best for me and where I was going versus being afraid for me or concerned for me. You know, those people, they still love me and care for me, but they're not listening to what's truly going on, and they're not supporting me in what I'm truly need to do next. So I always have that both ears open for that.
Hey superstars, it's Natalie, Community Director for Coach Karen. I wanted to let you know that we have a new mastermind launching next month, Enthusiasm Academy. This coaching track offers busy entrepreneurs and overwhelmed C-suite leaders who are determined to rise a powerful, streamlined program that includes one-on-one executive coaching with Coach Karen, peer advisory sessions, a wide range of expert speakers, robust mindset and business tools, and a powerful network. This is what Coach Karen's calling a program for beasts in beast mode. Applications are open right now on KarenEldad.com/Enthusiasm Academy.
I think that's wonderful. You know, my mug says young at heart. I'm a very big fan of Carl Jung. And really, he said that almost all criticism is projection, right? And so they don't mean any harm. You're right. They're just trying to project onto you their need to protect themselves. And that's just not what you need right now. You need holding of space and allowing of growth. What a relatable story, Ivy. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing transition today. You are, of course, an enormous successful pivot. I admire you immensely for what you have done and for what you do day in, day out with your incredible executive coaching clients. And I know that this is just a question of going from strength to strength for you. Thank you so much for sharing this today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to partake in a midlife conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have.
Hell yeah. And, you know, it's kind of like you said that your accountant was talking to you like a woman. We are not only discriminated against as women, I think it's also midlife crisis. The reason I wanted to bring it to the forefront with this mini series, Ivy, was because nobody talks about this at dinner parties, and it's not acknowledged. And the most common thing that I hear from people is, I don't feel 50. And I'm sitting there going, well, I don't feel 5'5", but I am. So that simply is a thing that we need to start to reframe, and hopefully to make it as ubiquitous as vulnerability has become, thanks to the work of Brené Brown. Thank you so much for your courage to share this story and your wisdom that you've shared with all of our listeners today. Friends, if Ivy Slater hasn't inspired you, I don't know what will. I hope you're going to connect with her work further. Everything is going to be linked in the show notes. And Ivy, I cannot wait until our next catch up and see what that conversation brings us. Friends, you know, Ivy's story reminds me a bit of my favorite midlife awakening story, the story of Julia Child. Ivy, you're going to love this. This year, I became obsessed with an incredible TV series on HBO called Julia, about Julia Child. This is where I learned that beyond what I knew already from the movie starring Meryl Streep, that not only did Julia Child pivot into her profound love for cooking in her late 30s, but she did so actually as a career pivot. Her career as a civil servant had ended in her late 30s, and then she was taken to France due to her husband's post. And this is where she starts to think, what am I and what am I going to do with the rest of my life? In this series, I realized that Julia Child's book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, that shot her into global consciousness, was only published when she was 49. 2 years later, Boston Public Broadcasting took a chance and aired a new kind of show, a first-time ever TV show about cooking that she starred in, The French Chef. She was then 51 years old. And from that moment on, Julia Child's career took off for 42 more years. In those 42 years, she wrote 18 more books and she created 12 TV cooking shows, ultimately with her life changing the way America cooked and ate, and becoming an icon so big that here we are still talking about her almost 20 years after her death. This is how I see midlife, and this is how I want you all to see it. I want to see more Julias rise out of the midlife crisis and rise to the occasion that lies before them. I want to see more Ivy Slaters. The next episodes of this season are about how to do just that in all aspects of your life, and I'm going to hope that you tune in. Listeners, if you loved today's episode, give us a 5-star rating on iTunes and subscribe. And thank you for listening today. We're going to see you next time for more Midlife Awakening.
Thank you for joining Coach Karen. Would you like to have your questions answered on a future episode? Visit KarenEldad.com. KEREN Eldad.com and tell us about your challenge or issue. Until next time, live with enthusiasm.